Up and at 'em, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for a special Wake Up Worcester right here on Charter Channel 3 as we talk with Joe O'Brien, running for mayor of the city of Worcester. And usually, of course, we have a number of guests throughout the morning on all different topics. Today, though, we are just focusing on Joe and his campaign. And, Joe, what you will bring to the city of Worcester if you're elected. Thank you for stopping by this morning.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's been great to be on your show a couple times to talk about the different issues and have an opportunity to get into a little bit more meat and substance about some of the things we're focusing on.
Well, that's what we hope to do today. Let's start with, let's go with the what if, and I'll ask all of the candidates this from the same perspective. You are elected. What is the first thing that Joe O'Brien does to make things better for the people of Worcester?
You know, I think absolutely the first thing we have to do is to sit down with our local business community and with all the small business and large business and have a serious conversation about how are we going to bring new businesses here to the Worcester area. You had me on in a previous show to talk a little bit about my Working Worcester paper, but fundamentally we are really concerned about the number of folks who are looking for work and the decline in the commercial tax base. So my first kind of point of order, I think, is to bring together our business community, small and large, and talk about how do we bring jobs to Worcester, how do we help encourage companies that are here to grow, and how do we kind of work together to kind of create a better business climate.
Well, that's a big part of it. People are always, it seems, talking about new businesses coming in and how do we get these new businesses in and what incentives do you give them. But we don't seem to talk as much, you just touched on it though, retention. I mean, how do we make sure that the businesses that are here stay here and grow? That's
right. You know, in my work in Congressman McGovern's office, I worked a lot with companies that we were trying to get to come here, but we often forget that the best people to work with are companies that are already here, companies that already know that we've got a great workforce, that we've got these great institutions of higher learning, that we've got a lot of advantages here in Worcester, and we should be working more closely with them. I've outlined in my paper that I'm going to set up a task force on job growth and retention and really start talking in depth with companies about how do we encourage you to stay and grow here, because as you know, and most business folks would tell you, they don't plan a year out or 2 years out, they're often planning 3 to 5 years out. So we want to make sure we're working very closely with them to encourage them to grow here and ask, what else can we do to be helpful? All
right, as far as getting businesses to come and locate here, what do you feel is the #1 reason that businesses don't? Is it the tax rate? Is the tax rate for businesses too high, and is that because we have this dual tax rate in Worcester?
It's actually two things. For a larger business, when you talk to larger businesses here in Worcester, and the work I've done to try to attract larger companies, part of the challenge we face is we don't have a large assemblable parcels, meaning, you know, many of these new companies that are coming, they want to have multiple acres. They don't just want a little couple thousand, square feet. They want a lot of space. For example, we were trying to recruit a company, Boston Power. They were looking for, a fairly large, substantial facility, and because we have many kind of these abandoned buildings and a lot of brownfield sites, that's a challenge for us, #1. So for larger companies, assemblable parcels, because the tax issue for them is a smaller part of their operational costs, that's the big issue. The second issue for smaller business, though, is certainly this dual tax rate. And I think we have to have a mayor who's going to be serious about appointing a task force. The city, and I believe the mayor had committed to appointing a task force more than a year ago to bring businesses together and talk about the tax rate and come up with a plan long term to address that. That hasn't happened, so certainly we've got to make that happen because we've got to address that dual tax rate.
If you end up with a tax rate in which over 5 years you begin to come closer to a single tax rate, even if you don't achieve that goal, but that you get closer, does that hurt the property owner in the city of Worcester?
Well, that's my commitment, is that we've got to do that in such a way that it doesn't hurt the property owners. I've gone door to door across the city, and I've been almost to 4,000 doors now. I've met so many people that are truly struggling to pay their residential property taxes, their water bills and sewer bills. We've got to be really conscientious of the fact that these folks are really struggling, and we've got to work very closely to make sure we're not going to put a heavy burden on them. I think the way you do that, you say, well, how do you do it then? Well, I think in my plan I've outlined a model similar that they did in Philadelphia, where you create real incentives for companies to stay here and grow here, and to attract companies to kind of invest in our vacant buildings here in the city. That will increase the number of commercial ratepayers, and over time that will allow you to, I think, diminish the burden on both of them as you grow that commercial base.
Is Worcester business friendly right now?
Well, when you talk to folks in the business community, many feel it's not. Many feel we need to do a lot better job creating an atmosphere that's welcoming to business folks. And that's why I've also talked about having this one point of entry. We call it a common front door, where any business, large and small, can come to get all the resources and information they need and supports they need, either to stay and grow here or to come here.
City Manager Mike O'Brien and his team, the administration, are they helping bring business here? Are they hurting bring business here? I mean, what's your take on the city manager in general, perhaps?
Well, first of all, let's just take right on the first part. This economic development team is very qualified, very competent. They're incredibly short-staffed. You know, we've got a couple people trying to retain businesses and attract new businesses and work within the kind of all the federal grants and guidelines. I think we really have to look about bulking up some of the resources in that office, because that's a smart investment. And I think they're doing a good job, but they need more help. Now, on the city manager.
Right, the job that he has done, because I've been surprised over the last couple of weeks that he seems suddenly to be a part of the conversation.
That's right.
And people have pointed to the fact that we don't seem to have had action on City Square. Or even you know, something maybe smaller than that, that, hey, why aren't we going to be skating out behind City Hall later on this winter? Why didn't that get pushed across the goal line? City manager doing a good job. What's your take?
I think the city manager is doing a good job, and I think is in a very difficult situation with incredible budget challenges that he's faced. I've worked very closely with the city manager over my time on the school committee, when I was on the school committee for 6 years, and in the last couple of years in my role with Congressman McGovern. We've worked together to respond to the ice storm and making sure FEMA provided resources and reimbursement for our city, and I've worked closely with him on this Asian longhorn beetle issue. The reality is that he's faced a whole bunch of kind of very difficult situations, almost a perfect storm of state budget shortfalls, municipal budget shortfalls. He's had the Asian longhorn beetle that's come and kind of done incredible damage in the Burncoat area and the ice storm. I just think, you know, we faced incredible challenges, and I think he's stepped up to the plate. And I know there's this kind of misinformation out there, because I have the support of some of our men and women who work for the city, that I'm somehow, you know, not interested in supporting Mike O'Brien. I think that's completely silly. I think he's done a tremendous job, and I'm a supporter, and I consider him to be a friend.
Well, now, and this is interesting, too, because, of course, you can be a supporter of Mike O'Brien, feel that the city manager has done a good job. At the same time, you could support, for example, that Worcester maybe should move towards a strong mayor form of government. One is not exclusive of the other. Sometimes I think people feel that it is, that somehow if you were to be for a strong mayor form of government, that means that you are pitted against the city manager. I don't know that that's not, you know, necessarily true. Having said all that, what do you feel about the strong mayor form of government if that comes up again?
You know, right now in this incredible challenging time that we face, I think absolutely this is not the time to have that conversation. We have a very competent, strong city manager, and I think we've got to all be working together on how to move this city forward, and Mike O'Brien's a big part of that. In the past, I have said that if you look at some other communities that have done well in this region, you know, they do have a strong mayor, but I think right now is not the time for this conversation. I think we should be supporting Mike O'Brien and all working together to move this city through these challenging times.
Coming up, much more with Joe O'Brien as we talk about his vision. If he were to be elected the next mayor of the city of Worcester, what would Worcester look like? What are the top priorities? And we'll talk more with Joe straight ahead right here on Wake Up Worcester. People running round, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Speaking with Joe O'Brien.